What is policy making? So policy making is actually the formulations of ideas or plans that are being used by governments on the basis of making decisions. And next, we're gonna explain about people. What is people? People is actually a country. A people in a country or a community, and populations in a specific country. So, if we relate these two regarding the policy making and public, so public participations in policy making, public policy making is a process where the public itself involved and engage in the process of this policy making, so that the policy will be much more closer and reliable for the definitely for the public, because we know that usually the public knowing much more what happened on the ground, what happened between them compared to the leaders on top. And we could say that the government should be welcome these opportunities in open hands, since this effort by involving public into the public policy making, it can help the policy to be much more relate to the public, and also it will increase their integrity and also help them in governance of the country.
Hi, I would like to continue with the executive summary. Public participation is considered the cornerstone in implementing of good governance. Participation can be in the form of direct communication by the public or through legitimate intermediate institution or representative. In addition, participations as the means by which people who are not elected, appointed official of agency and governments influence decisions about the programs and policy which affect their life. Therefore, public participation is citizen engagement towards the administration of local authority affairs involving district matters. This means that the citizens within the local government jurisdiction are given the chance to contribute to the management of certain local authorities' policy-making agenda. In engaging the citizen, local authorities will receive immediate feedback on the needs and wants of the resident, resulting in better planning and implementation of citizen-centered projects.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Hawa binti Kamsin. Today I would like to present about the methodology in our research. Okay, the methodology means is the specific procedure or technique used to identify, select, process, and analysis the information about a certain topic that we choose for our research. Okay, in methodology research, there consists of a few elements that must have in this part, which is the approach, the data collection, and the data analysis of this research. Okay, the first element is approach. The approach can be divided into three, which is qualitative, quantitative, and mixed. Mixed is the combination between the qualitative and quantitative approach or method. Okay, qualitative mean the qualitative approach or method is the kind of research that produce finding not related to the statistic procedure or numbering. It different from the quantitative method, which is related to statistic and numbering. For this research, we use the qualitative method in this research. The next is data collection. Data collection can be divided into two parts, which is the preliminary data and secondary data. The preliminary data means the original data that we collect by the researcher directly for the main resource through interview, survey, and questionnaire. And next is secondary data. Secondary data is the data which is the previous for the researcher before this, which is we collect the data that already have from the individual or researcher. The example of secondary data is the data we can get the data from the newspaper, the government record, or the website. Okay, for this research, we apply the secondary data. Why we choose the secondary data? Because it can save cost and it's also save time. Okay, in this research, there consists a few elements of managing the public participation. We also want to define whether the rational or irrational in decision making process, and we also can define whether the good governance depend on the public policy process. Okay, the next part or the last part in methodology is data analysis. Okay, in terms of data analysis, in this part we have to summarize the data that we get and interpret the data. Okay, we also can study about the pattern and trend. After that, we can make hypotheses from the data collection that we get. Okay, from the data we can interpret that how important public participation in public decision making in Malaysia. That's all for me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Intan. I will continue talking about the findings and the discussions in the matter of public participant in the public policy making. So, first of all, public participant can lead to a better articulation of the community needs and clearer solutions to present the challenges. But there is a risk that some of the groups will be disproportionately represented and may manipulate the system in advance individual rather than the communal interest. So in addition, there is often a lack of transparency, and the process themselves can encourage conflict. Okay, so the first point, rational and irrational decision making. So in Malaysia, public policies are formulated vis-a-vis, which is face-to-face, the political and social structure of the nation and the future demand and needs of the nation as a whole, while taking into consideration of the diversified ethnicity of the nation and close proximity of the social and political system of the nation. So in order to understand the policy formulation in Malaysia, it is essential to understand that the country's constitutional framework. So the research shows that much decision making in public life is reached by irrational process. So a rational decision making process would look something like identifying the problem and or identifying the opportunity. So brainstorming, alternative solution, evaluate alternatives, and selecting a solution, implementing and evaluating a solution chosen. So such as a process can be expected of professionals but not of citizens, leaving the question of whether the issue would be solved quicker or more responsibly by a professional. Second point, managing public participation. So part of managing a participation atmosphere involves building trust bottom up. Official must examine the social environment and learn the composition and the characteristics of the community, especially of the competing interest. So they must understand the entire community's agenda. It is important to take note of what is important to the groups in the margins and review the history of the community. So we call this as social scanning. When deciding to involve the public, there must be a long-term commitment to build a relationship with a common vision that brings the government and the people together. So when implemented responsibly, it enables the public to participate in policy making, can benefit the community greatly and strengthen the relationship between the government and the people. So it helps to enhance the trust in government. But all this must be implemented very carefully. So that is all from me. Shazwani will continue for the next point.
Assalamualaikum to everyone. My name is Nur Shazwani. So I'll proceed to the findings and discussion. So the third finding and discussion is overview of the public or private organization. During the Badawi era was increased in the use of outside consult that to make policy papers. All these corridor policies statements were formulated by a consultant that appointed by a government link corporation, or we call it as a GLC, that's selected by the government to oversee each corridors. Meanwhile, during the Najib administration, public policy almost become the complete dominant of a consult who undertake studies for the EPU. Corridor authorities and the economic transformations program, or we call it ETP. Although there is something positive about using outside consult to break out the public service while and bring in a fresh idea for governance, in a practice, many of these reports are undertaken by a fresh graduate MBA, who really rely on popular terms, cliche and graphic to deliver ideas that may in some cases not be throughout this practical. The another problem will with all this report is there is most cases outcome are forecast so far into a future. For example, 15 years in a Malaysia biotechnology policy, they lose their realism and become a wish list that nobody is really responsible for the achieving. This leave many of our program open to the criticism of being more public relation exercise and program for connected business to get rich on it. Over the previous few years, a number of scandal involving ministers such as the National Free Law Center have eroded public trust. Only a few these consultants have directly experience of a competition in the field for which they will waiting reports. There is a risk here where the public policy has become a commodity in a governance, and some the policy is end itself, such as in Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya. So the next finding and discussion is a good governance depends upon sound public policy process. So basically, a great public policy is a foundation for a good governance, and it's a subject that has been almost completely overlooked by those participating in a Malaysia political process. So in Malaysia, public policy must based on the common vision with involvement from the relevant all of the stakeholders, as well as being equitable and also transparent. The political parties must devote more resources for formulating comprehensive policy so that these voters can cast ballots based on their policies. Political whim and infection with outside parties will continue to influence public policy. In Malaysia, for Malaysia future success will be defined not by two rules, but by how it is governance. It is a pastime for the top down that approach to public policy making to be reconsidered and replaced with a more participative one. If true evaluation and monitoring are not conducted on plan and existing public policy, there will be nothing more than a risk, especially when the consequence will be the notice in the community for a year. So that's it from me.
Okay, so as for conclusions, so public participations can considered crucial in public policy making, process, since public is the main factor that can adjust any or can enhance any policy in the public policy making. And then the second point is Malaysia should reflect on the other countries. For example, Romania, United Kingdom, Austria, Hungary, Bosnia, Sweden, and Denmark, so that Malaysia could have a better options in allowing public participations in public policy making process. And lastly, further study should be done or should be taken out by the government, so that the most effective measure in allowing the public participations in public policy making can be handled out. So that's all. Thank you.